Let's update you on this board state. Looks like Elspeth is finally getting to work here. Selden with a lot of lands in play, a D-Sphere on an Archangel, a D-Sphere on an Anjani, a Banishing Light on a Courser of Crewfix. But Granado, he's got an Obsidian that looks to be bouncing in and out and all around. Not sure how many cards Selden has in his hand or deck, and it looks like Granado actually is doing a pretty good job of keeping up here.
It is one of the few ways that the junk deck can win the game when it gets to this spot is Obsidian just stealing it.
Looks like we may have a Banishing Light coming to the table here in just a moment from Granado, but for right now, he's going to activate Underworld Connections. These guys are playing a marathon affair. This is still game one. We finished a 3-game match in the meantime. And this is a matchup where I'm in agreement with you. I think that things favor Selden here, especially in game one, but Granado's been able to keep up.
It's impressive. The reason that I like Keith's matchup here is he can apply the full lock because he has Elixir. I'm not a huge Elixir fan in general, but this is one of the matchups where you get really paid off for having it. Because you can get these board states where the junk deck can keep up with you, and something like looping Revelation and decking them is something you need to consider.
We do have our life totals correct right now. It's Granado at 20, Selden at 3. Obsidian looking to get the job done. This is a Banishing Light. We'll see exactly which one of those effects it's targeting. And it's going to go with Elspeth, so get that thing out of here. See your Hero's Downfall over there as well. And it looks like you have to, tough to say if Obsidian can afford to attack right now.
Well, it's pretty bad if he gets hit with an Azorius Charm in the spot. He may have had an opportunity to do that while he had the Underworld Connections up, so he could have drawn it and recast it.
Yeah. There's a cycling of Azorius Charm, so a good play there by Josh. Don't want that thing on top of your deck and then getting encountered. And it looks like Keith Selden is going to concede this game, so Josh Granado is going to win game number one in what looks like to be a very difficult game one matchup for him.
That's a huge swing in the matchup, of course, because post-board here, he gets to clean up his deck quite a bit and get rid of some of these removal spells and bring in better tools.
And that's exactly what we're going to take a look at right now, are these sideboards here. We will start with Selden. 3 copies of Last Breath, 2 Celestial Flare, 2 Gainsay, 2 Archangel of Thune, a Negate, a Quicken, a Deicide, a Dispel, a Banishing Light, and a Blind Obedience.
I'm not really a huge fan of very much that's going on here for this matchup. I would be surprised if he went to the Archangel route because Josh is going to be leaving in some copies of Hero's Downfall. He has Elspeth in his deck. It seems, and he can also just overpower it. It seems like a long ball scenario for that card to be very good. I mean, the Banishing Light is fine, I suppose, but yeah, it's a real stretch here to come up with cards that are meaningful.
The only card that I actually kind of like is a Blind Obedience, of course. Just, yeah, it's fine just because of Obsidian, but at the same time, Obsidian just might not attack.
Right.
As we just saw at the back end of that game, Obsidian may have no interest in attacking because of Azorius Charm. So how good is Blind Obedience in this matchup as opposed to a deck that has Mistcutter Hydras and Friends? Not as good.
Correct. And again, deck lists are public. You saw the players going over each other's deck lists there before we came back to the booth here. So they have full information. They know that Mistcutter Hydra is not a factor in the matchup, and so Blind Obedience is going to be staying home, I would imagine.
On the other side of things, 2 Nyx Fleece Ram and Underworld Connections, 2 Sin Collector, 2 Deicide, 2 Lifebane Zombie, 2 Golgari Charm, 2 Whip of Erebos, 2 Bioblight. Granado's deck gets much better.
A lot to like here. The 2 gold copies of Golgari Charm. He's playing against a classic build of the deck. Actually, a build that has Font of Fortunes in it as opposed to Divination. So Golgari Charm getting even a little bit better, potentially. Yeah. The Lifebane Zombies and the Sin Collectors, the additional Underworld Connections, maybe Whip of Erebos for a little more staying power. None of these cards are excellent in the matchup, with the exception of the Underworld Connections and the Sin Collector. But the more important thing is allowing Josh to remove some of his removal spells he doesn't want that many of in the matchup.
I think that Granado winning game one is huge because, you know, even if he loses game two, game three is going to be on the play, but things get so much better for him in game number 2 and 3. And as we oftentimes like to say, you play more games with your sideboard than without.
And there's a lot of decks, Junk mid-range, the Jund mid-range list that we've seen, not the Monsters list necessarily, although Monsters has that element as well, of just being able to sideboard 4, 5, 6, 7 cards in every single matchup and improve post-board. It's an understated feature of how these decks function, but it is a big deal, especially over a long tournament. You're playing a lot of post-board games.
While these players do sideboard and shuffle up, I know that you know, we're starting right now in our semifinals, but that's not the way that things are always going to be moving forward, of course, because we're beginning our Modern Premier IQs here. And I'm pretty excited about this because who doesn't love Modern?
Yeah, and these are going to be starting in Baltimore every Open Series on Sunday. $5,000 in cash prizes, open points to all participants, plus 4 invites to the Invitational for the top 4 competitors, side event prizes, the whole shebang. We're going to be running these every Sunday, again, starting in Baltimore. And if you're interested in running these on the local level, we have those available as well. Stores, tournament organizers, you can apply for these premier level IQs the same way that you apply right now for your regular IQs. And we're really excited to bring these events to players. We've been asked for Modern events in our Opens for a very long time. We wanted to find a way to fit that in without causing any harm to the Standard or Legacy Opens. And so we're doing that again, starting in Baltimore. You see the new schedule. We're going to be flipping a couple things around here. We're going to be playing the entire elimination rounds of the Standard Open on Sunday instead of playing the quarterfinals on Saturday. We're going to be starting the Legacy Open an hour earlier, and then we're going to have the Modern Premier IQ starting 10 o'clock in the morning. So all this is to fit in additional tournaments to make sure that tournaments aren't running into, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 in the morning like they have been periodically. So we're just trying to provide a better experience for the staff here, the players, you watching at home. And to that end, we're flipping the schedule around a little bit, but more importantly, adding these premier level Modern IQs.
You mentioned stores already do have it, which is pretty awesome. We've got stores in Tampa, Tacoma, which is pretty close to me, Knoxville, Tennessee, Denver, Colorado, and Roseville. More coming in 2014. You have to imagine more in 2015 as well. I don't want to even get to that year, though. I guess we got to make it through this one.
Correct. But stores, again, if you're interested in applying for this, you can apply through the normal organized play channels that we have at Star City Games. Our representatives will be happy to help you get the setup if you've never run this before. And we're very excited about this program. More high-level organized play, especially with a little bit more of a modern focus on the heels of Grand Prix Richmond and the attendance that we had in that event and the reception that Star City Games got for running modern events. We wanted to bring it to the Open Series on a more consistent basis, and so starting in a couple weeks, that's going to be happening.
So what's the best trip we've taken so far this year?
The best trip. You got to
maybe the most memorable trip we've taken this year. Was it getting stuck in Indy?
Yeah, if we're talking about being memorable, it was definitely getting stuck in Indianapolis and meeting the Hornets general manager and having a conversation with him about basketball. It's hard to top that one.
There's been some good ones. The foot in Atlanta.
Your foot getting...
Where I just couldn't walk on my birthday or work.
Your foot getting screwed up in Atlanta.
After trying to run in the morning. I guess I just should never exercise.
Big shout out to Todd Anderson for tagging in for that
Absolutely.
Sunday Open. Yep.
The Columbus Open was a lot of fun as well. I mean, we just did the Invitational at Origins, which was a lot of fun. Knoxville was really good.
Knoxville was really good.
We've been doing a lot of traveling.
It's
getting
true.
Around. I think it might be Indy, though. Just the fact that we woke up on Monday morning and the water didn't work, I think was one of the highlights of the year.
Yeah. And
challenging the polar vortex and saying it's not going to be that big of a deal because, I mean, it didn't seem like it was anything really. I've never been so wrong.
Yeah, we were both wrong. See Josh Granado on the right there in a Desert Sky Games t-shirt. That's a store out in the Phoenix area.
Oh, yeah?
One of the owners of that operation, Mike Gerard, a good friend of mine, former co-worker. So
very nice.
Big shout out to Desert Sky Games. I went out there to Gunsling for pre-release. I can't remember which one it was now. I think it was maybe Dragon's Maze I went out for. But in any event, I had a really good time at that store.
Okay.
Really good local player base.
You know, I've never been to Phoenix.
It's a really fun city.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, Phoenix is. I mean, the summer is rough. It's rough, but it is a really fun city.
I hope we can bring the Open Series back there. They give me a reason to go. I've never been there or New Orleans.
Oh, New Orleans, you're missing out.
So I've heard.
That's on the top of my list. I'm going to be taking a vacation there soon, if the Open Series doesn't come back.
Where do you get all this vacation time? Going to Portland, going to Sydney. You ever work?
I do.
I find time.
Yeah. Got to take care of you, too, you know?
This is definitely true. Font of Fortune's going to come on down, turn number 2. Haven't seen this one a lot in Standard.
I like this addition to Keith's list a bit. It makes sense to me. He's playing Detention Sphere and Dissolve, so his third turn is going to be tied up. Divination's off the table, but you can play this on turn 2 and then sacrifice it whenever you have some mana left over.
Well, Font of Fortune's is at the ready. Gala Shrine going to come into play untapped. Now here's a Courser of Krufix. See if this will resolve. And it will. Top card is a swamp, so Granado working with some information. The font will be busted. Couple of cards coming. Selden will take a draw. See a D-Sphere over there, and Elspeth. I have to imagine he's got some lands to play.
Yeah, it looks like at least land drop 4 and 5 are taken care of.
And there's a Jace. This is a really good start for Keith.
Yeah, although he neither dissolved nor detention sphere this, so just gonna have a little time to work with this card, with this courser here. See if he's able to capitalize.
He's got a Thoughtseize and a Connections over there. You have to imagine that Connections is pretty appealing in this situation.
Yeah.
Especially when you have Abrupt Decays for D-Spheres. Looks like he's going to go with Thoughtseize instead.
I think that would have been a good Connections turn right there. You get to at least draw 1 card and probably force a response from Keith the following turn.
And the goal, of course, in playing against Blue-White is to make them tap mana in their own turn, which would have forced Keith to do so. You can Abrupt Decay, a sphere there, and, kind of have this little mini game where you get to keep your Connections, presumably. And really get that card advantage engine online, because right now, the Blue-White player is ahead of you.
And there's also not anything that he specifically has to Thoughtseize this turn. I can imagine, Keith just made his 5th land drop. I can't beat an Elspeth. Maybe I need to give up a little bit of efficiency to make sure that I take that card out, but there's not really anything going on turn 5 that necessitates playing a Thoughtseize this turn.
Well, Elspeth's going to bite the dust. We'll see where Courser wants to go, assuming that it does have some interest in attacking, and it will. So Jace is going to go down 1 point, and Granado will pass the turn back. You see the Banishing Light right on top of Josh's deck right now. Looks like 2 copies of Abrupt Decay in hand, as well as that Underworld Connections. Azorius Guildgate's going to come in.
And I'm interested to see if Josh is trying to play some sort of win condition game here. Keith, without that many ways to win in his list, is he going to try to go long and attack Keith's ways to actually go about winning the game?
Banishing Light's going to add it to the hand. Top card is a Scavenging Ooze. We may see Banishing Light here. Something to draw out a counterspell, I imagine is going to happen. You know your opponent has Dissolve, and you opted not to take it. So at this point, I think you have to throw a card, into the graveyard, essentially is what you're doing.
Yeah, it has to be something good enough to counter, but not so good that you really care about it, and I think Banishing Light qualifies.
What it can't be is Underworld Connections. That card's too important.
Correct.
And there is Banishing Light, so no interest in having a fight over that. Now here comes an attack here for 1. Selden going to go down to 19.
Keith playing a pretty passive game himself here. I'm surprised if he was willing to not fight over a removal spell on the Jace. I suspect that I would have at least minus the Jace the previous turn.
Yeah. Get some cards out of it. He didn't get any cards out of it. So there are 3 soldier tokens. Elspeth going to take up to 5. Top card now, Temple of Silence. So it looks like that. It's going to go to the bottom with the Scry. Now mystery card is a Whip of Erebos. Long game is something Granado can certainly play. This is 3 mana. That's a Hero's Downfall. That one's going after Elspeth.
Now, keep in mind, Keith only has 2 copies of Elspeth in his list. Now, he still has the Elixir, of course, and an Aetherling. But he is already running pretty low on ways to go about winning the game.
So another Dissolve added to Selden's hand. There's a D-Sphere. And now this is an attack here for 3. So D-Sphere with the ability to leave Dissolve up. You see what variables get turned down. Granado will draw a card. Not going to hit a land drop this turn. Could Abrupt Decay that Detention Sphere to get the Courser back. Looks like he's going to just lead with a Scavenging Ooze here. See if this buys out a counterspell potentially.
Yeah, Josh trying to do kind of the same thing as before. Play something that's non-critical, but may be worth a counterspell.
I was wondering if this Ooze is just annoying enough to counter.
Yeah. Although now with, there's some small incentive to not counter creatures because there's a whip that Keith knows about.
Looks like a deicide was the draw. And that one will give Jace back. If Selden would like, can also save for Underworld Connections and some other things. So deicide very, very good in this matchup. And going to be used right now on the Banishing Light. Selden saying, I would like my Jace back right away, please. So that'll come in. It'll start at 4. It's going to go down to 2. So cards coming here for Selden. You've got an Island, a Supreme Verdict, and a Plains. Not the most threatening Jace.
And this is the risk of trying to go really long with blue-white control. Even when you have removal spells and way to contest what they're doing, their card drawing is just a lot more efficient than yours. And when they have Elixir, they have an inevitability. Eventually, all this discard doesn't get undone, obviously, but you can't cut them off of win conditions altogether.
Abrupt Decay, going to take down Courser. She's going to take down Detention Sphere to get Courser back. Now Courser going to go to the Grip, the top card here, Golgari Charm. Granado still without Underworld Connections, looking for a good spot to cast it, but he has not found one. Missed an opportunity to play it early on in the game. You have to imagine that card advantage, even if it would have been momentary, would certainly have helped him here.
Yeah, that could have been deployed on the 3rd turn. Instead, it's still in his hand.
Well, Courser is a bit of a card advantage engine. Not the best one. So now here's Whip of Erebos. So that'll be the test spell. And there's a dissolve.
And I think the reason Keith wants to dissolve this is because it just makes Obsidian too threatening.
Yeah. Whip is really good in these type of matchups. One more whip for Granado to draw to. Just going to pass the turn back here.
I think I would have at least thrown an attack with the Courser at Jace.
Pretty safe attack.
Maybe you don't want to trade the Ooze for 2 tokens, although I still think it's worth considering. But the attack of Courser at Jace is basically just a freebie.
Elevator goes up on Jace. Now here's an attack, so this reeks of a Supreme Verdict. You're going to get some blocks here. 1 damage will come through. I think the creatures are all going to hit the dust here in a moment. Yeah, there's that. So Verdict's going to clean everything up with still the ability to dissolve. I think Granado's going to look in the graveyard, see if there's any creatures to remove with Scavenging Ooze before moving forward.
Or just anything at all. Remember, there's an Elixir in here, so...
Yeah.
The Ooze is a weapon. I mean, arguably... Josh should have made some effort to remove both Elspeths.
Yeah, a little bit earlier.
Yeah, and maybe that's actually an angle that matters.
Golgari Charm, the draw. Of course, Selden knew about that from the information from Courser. This is probably going to be Underworld Connections, but this was the big issue. Is this is really late to the party. And we could have slid this under counterspells a long time ago if you were Selden, or excuse me, if you were Granado. Now you're giving Selden the option to counter this if you'd like, or just Detention Sphere it in just a moment. And this will be a dissolve. I think dissolving there is correct. I don't want to give the opponent any extra cards.
And I also don't want to have a fight over every Golgari Charm and Abrupt Decay, unlocking this thing going forward if the plan is to just Detention Sphere it the following turn.
Jace going to take on down. A couple cards coming here, an Island, and an Aetherling. Aetherling's by itself, and it's predictably going to the hand. There's a land for the turn. And it may be time to deploy the win condition.
He also has the option to rev this turn, but I think the coast is clear enough for Aetherling.
I think Selden comes to the same conclusion. There is the 4/5 with the necessary mana available. Granado will draw a card here. It's a copy of Scavenging Ooze, but I think we know how this song and dance works.
Yeah, you can't race, especially with no board. And Josh will wisely tap the mat.
Yeah, why waste any more time?
All right.
I'm not going to use any more mental energy on this game. I am beat. So Keith Selden is going to tie things up here. Blue-white control and junk mid-range going to go to a third game.
And I think it's, Josh really needs to deploy underworld connections on time if he gets the option to do so. There are only 2 copies of Syncopate and a Negate in Keith's list, so the coast is probably clear on the third turn of the game if he's on the play. And I think that was the entire game there. He had an opportunity to get underworld connections online and draw a card on the 4th turn of the game, elected not to, and basically didn't quite die with it in his hand because at some point he did deploy it into a dissolve, but by the time he got to it, the game was already decided.
Yeah, the card didn't have any effect on the game, and I think that's the bigger problem, is that Underworld Connection is such an important card in the matchup that when you draw one of your trump cards like that, you have to deploy it on time and make sure that this has an effect. And that just did not happen.
I can understand, it's turn 3, and I don't want to get hit by deicide, so I want to try to wait till the 4th turn so I at least draw 1 card.
That's perfectly fine.
But Josh had that opportunity.
Yeah. We'll see if things change here. Again, I think the matchup is quite good for Granado. You see the sideboard there. 2 Sin Collectors and additional Underworld Connections. He's already got a couple in his main. You see the deicides that he has for Detention Spheres and Banishing Lights. Same thing can be said for Golgari Charm. And of course, with Variabos in combination with Obsidian. A lot of cards to like here in a sideboarded game against Blue-White. I still think that he's the favorite.
It's just, Keith with his dissolves and Jaces and Sphinx's Revelation, the pressure's on Josh to get all the pieces of the puzzle lined up. Given enough time, Keith is just going to draw cards and fight off the critical pieces that Josh has and win the game at his leisure. So Josh has a lot of good cards. A lot of them synergize very nicely. But he has to find the right mixture of them, and that's harder to do for Josh than it is for Keith.
Well, the winner of this match is going to play against Kevin Rand, playing Mono Red, the 7th seed. So whoever does this one does get to play first against Mono Red, which is certainly a big deal. But can they overcome the power of that deck, which is surprisingly really well situated?
I mean, both of these players have some pluses and some minuses in their deck against something like Mono Red. Both matchups are close, I believe.
Of course, after this game is over, we'll bring it back to the booth. We will announce our 6-month premium winner. Then we'll take a short little break. We'll do the finals, crown ourselves our first champion this weekend. Someone's going to sit down in the sideboard with Nick Miller. We're going to find out who it's going to be. Godless trying to start things off. This may be an untapped Godless Shrine. We'll find out in just a moment here. Looks like players are taking a pause. And Granado trying to figure out exactly what he wants to do with it. And yeah, looks like it is just going to come into play tap. So there's a Thoughtseize over there in his hand. A Hallowed Fountain there for Selden. Granado will draw a cards copy of Sin Collector. That's a great way to break the parity.
That's one of his best cards in the matchup.
I feel like we say that about Sin Collector a lot.
Yep, a discard spell that pressures Jace.
Yeah.
Or the life total.
See if it's on fire for Thoughtseize. Looks like it is. See what we're working with right away. And you see a Hallowed Fountain. What we're looking at is not a lot of lands. A Quicken, a Supreme Verdict, 1 foil, 1 regular, along with a Jace, a Banishing Light, and a Dissolve. So you're looking at a player here in Selden who needs lands badly.
And if I'm Josh here and I'm planning on playing Sin Collector next turn, I'm strongly considering taking the Quicken out of his hands.
That's what I would have thought about doing as well. No cantrips for you. You're relying on that Quicken to draw cards and to hit land drops.
I don't mind taking Dissolve here either because it's one of Keith's best cards in the matchup. But I think there's a strong argument here to just say it's too unlikely you make all your land drops here if I take that, and I can still Sin Collector your Dissolve the next turn.
Selden will take a draw. It's a copy of Negate. See if he plays this dual land untapped. Has the ability to play Hallowed Fountain untapped and take 2, go down to 18.
I think he's very likely to do it now because Josh could be planning on deploying Underworld Connections next turn.
He's just going to play a tap and pass the turn back. And I would have preferred to play the untapped simply because it'll give Josh a little bit of pause about what he wants to do. There's no pause now. He's just going to move in. Now here's a Sin Collector. We're going to spin that Quicken. So mystery card coming. It's a copy of Mutavault. Now you can see the hand, pretty much the same as last time. Mutavault and Negator are the new cards. Banishing Light, 2 copies of Supreme Verdict, and Jace are the old ones.
Although that click and turning into a land drop here, a big swing for Keith. If he gets to 4 mana, he can play a real game here.
Granado looking at a hand with Underworld connections in it, as well as Abrupt Decay. So it seems like maybe Negate may be the best choice, depending on how his lands do line up.
Seems likely here. He doesn't care that much about Banishing Light because then he, the Banishing Lights play into the Golgari Charm Abrupt Decay fight that Josh is really well equipped to win. But the counter spells, those are much more problematic.
And it will be Negate that goes. When you know your opponent has 2 copies of Supreme Verdict and Banishing Light, you can pace the game appropriately.
Yeah. That's the other thing playing against Blue-White, the information is worth so much as well.
Elspeth the draw. Mutavault the land that'll come into play. And Selden has no interest in casting Vanishing Light. Looks like a Whip Veribos is the draw, and I think that Granado may be having some mana issues right now.
Not uncommon for Junkless. I mean, the mana is really stretched.
See, Lifebane, Zombie, Connections, cards that he can't cast. An island off the top for Selden is rather timely. That'll allow him to cast Jace. He may be forced to take this Jace up, and that is the case. Granado needs a second black right now. He found it, but it comes into play tapped.
Still better this turn than not. I mean, Josh is going to be able to start playing some stuff next turn.
Jace is going to go down to 4. Pass the turn back over to Selden, who will take a draw here. It's a copy of Dissolve.
Huge draw. Again, Josh's deck is all just main phasing 4, 5, 6 mana spells, so.
Counter spells at a premium here. Another copy, of Temple of Malady. That's going to come in. Top card, going to go somewhere. You see Granado's going to consult the hand. We'll find out where this is going to go in just a moment.
So he now has the mana for Obsidian next turn.
In for 1. I think you got to run a spell out here in some fashion. It's going to be an attempt at Lifebane Zombie.
Interesting that Keith didn't even consider animating the Mutavault and blocking there against the 1/1 Sync Collector.
Yeah. Now here's a Lifebane. 2 Verdicts, Elspeth, Banishing Light, and Dissolve are the cards that Granado is looking at.
So what is Selden's outs to a resolved Obsidian?
Azorius charming it, which...
So nothing, I guess, is...
That's my secret way of saying none. No Renounce the Guild's type effects, nothing to remove it from the game, unless there's poor management of the card on Josh's side.
Right. Keith could potentially erase it by revving and elixiring and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but it's in play. And that's tough if you're in Keith's position here, because this is a really nice spot, it looks like, to minus Jason Supreme Verdict, but he may not be able to beat Obsidian.
Temple of Lightning going to come in. Yeah, this is a compelling position to cast a Supreme Verdict, which I think is exactly what Josh wants to have happen. Kind of reeling him in a little bit. Jay's going to tick up. Just going to pass the turn back, so no Verdict will be cast here.
Refuses to play into it.
Yeah, some discipline for sure. Mana can influence the draw, so Granado finally finding some lands. I believe in this situation, Whip is the perfect test spell.
Yep. Forces a response, but not a critical piece. The perfect test spell.
If it resolves, that's cool. If it gets countered,
That's cool too.
That's cool too. So we're now going to organize that mana. You see the connections over there.
With Obsidian in hand, Josh may value Whip higher than test spell. He may view the connections now as the test spell.
Mm-hmm. Good place to start is simply by attacking. So Jace is going to go down to 2. And Jace has been just an annoyance this game, and kind of playing the role of Fog. Just a lot of attention has been directed that way.
Given how slow and kind of attrition-y the matchup is, I think that Keith needs to get some cards out of Jace next turn.
Yeah, I think so too. See what the test spell is going to be here. Looks like it's going to be Underworld Connections on Manic Influence. And that's going to resolve, so no dissolve there. And for Granado, you're happy about that.
Yeah, great.
Beautiful to draw here for Selden.
Now it's in play, that's the critical thing. And now if Keith wants to fight over this, it's going to be with the Detention Spheres and Banishing Lights, and that plays right into Josh's hands. And you can see he's worried, you know, he can tap out for Elspeth here, but that may not be able to race Obsidat in this spot.
Tapping out for Elspeth right now seems to be a real risky play.
Yeah.
You have to imagine your opponent has some sort of strength in hand with how much Granado has been thinking through his decisions and how he wants to lay things out. And you have access to the deck list, so you know there's some powerful cards looming over there. Would be very surprised if Elspeth would get the job done.
But he's going to pull the trigger.
So the Sun Champion comes in, 3 soldiers do as well. The Connections activation will give Granado a card. So it looks like just a couple of lands are drawn. Nothing all that intimidating, but the most intimidating card I think right now is just in Granado's hand, and that's the Obsidat. And the window is wide open to cast it. So there's your 5 mana. There is the Ghost Council. It's time for a little drain, a little gain. Let's see if he can ride this thing to victory.
So now from this spot, Keith has 2 paths to victory. He can try to basically lock Josh out of the game entirely by looping Revelations and so forth, or he can win with beating down with Elspeth tokens.
Yep.
But winning with something like Aetherling and his board control elements probably can't happen anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so. Keeping Elspeth in check is, I think, the idea here. There goes Obsidat. See the land drawn there for Selden. There's the island.
I mean, Keith can start getting frisky with some of his attackers here.
I agree.
Bringing in and out, and you know, there's only the Sin Collector on defense.
He can get a lot more aggressive. Throw some soldiers away to some attacks, keep ticking Elspeth up, manage Jace. He can try to get this game over with quicker. You see Sin Collector's now out of the way.
You know, that's a block there from Josh, I think, respecting the possibility of Supreme Verdict this turn.
And you know Selden has 2. Remember, this was a game that Keith Selden had some mana issues with. He was able to come back. Now he's working with his Planeswalkers and some high-powered blue-white spells. There's the Supreme Verdict to clear everything up. Hasn't used Elspeth yet. Wants to make sure he does that. There we go. That's important. Jace's going to take down. See Sphere among others. Would have liked to see the Jace activation to start things off.
Not great operations. Although I guess theoretically some of this is informed by whether or not Josh wanted to block with the Sin Collector, though probably not, because he was still willing to Supreme Verdict even with the Sin Collector no longer in play.
Yeah. You know, if Selden were to hit a Quicken, for example, Quicken plus Verdict in this situation is quite good.
Yeah. Yep.
Take care of Obsidat. Now that plays off the table. Knows that's going to come back. Gain 2, drain 2. Connections is the draw.
Yeah, one quicken in his sideboard, but that had to be burned as a cycle earlier.
There's a Thoughtseize. There's a Dissolve. So the door's open to resolve something.
If he finds Golgari Charm this turn, this could be a huge swing.
He's clear for takeoff as far as attacking is concerned.
Could take care of Elspeth and the tokens this turn.
Thoughtseize going to take a look at a D-Sphere, Banishing Light, and a Supreme Verdict.
And this probably shuts off the damage racing route for pretty much forever.
Chances are.
Yeah.
Keeping Whip off the table is actually pretty hard to do because of the Abrupt Decays in Granado's deck. So,
Yeah, that's the thing. The counter spells are so good against junk mid-range, but trying to fight it with Detention Sphere and Banishing Light is really bad because they have a lot of cards to fight over that stuff.
Elspeth and Jace both ticking up. 3 more soldiers coming in. An attack here for 2. Granado's going to go down to 16. And oddly enough, even though Selden has 2 Planeswalkers in play, I actually kind of like Granado's spot here.
Yeah, both. I think Keith is still in a position where Revelation maybe tips the game over for him. He may be able to overpower up to that, but it's going to be hard for him to win playing, something resembling an honest game here.
Ozetta will come back in. Granado will draw a card. It's a Johnny. That one doesn't seem great on this board.
Yeah, Planeswalkers are not awesome here. Granado could really use to find one of his copies of Golgari Charm. That would help a lot here.
Connections activation here in just a moment, it looks like.
Yeah, just trying to figure out if he already has something to do with all of his mana this turn, in which case he'll connections.
He's got a whole bunch of it too. And players just making sure the life totals are correct and all that good stuff. And now I think we're going to be okay to continue play. Yeah, oddly enough, as good as a Johnny is against these other control decks, it seems like it's at its best right now. So here's an Abrupt Decay. It looks like to take care of Banishing Light, I imagine. So Whip is going to come back. Maybe we get a Whip activation. Looks like we are.
There's a Sign Collector hanging out there.
Yep. A couple copies of Supreme Verdict. So now we're going to get some attacks because we know the coast is clear. So some blocks will take place. Some Elspeth tokens will die and some life will be gained. I think I may have liked the activation on Whip on Lifebane Zombie to finish off Jace.
Yeah, that seemed like a really good spot for it.
And of course that Sin Collector will have to be exiled because of Whip. I want to make sure the opponent doesn't keep getting that back. That might be tough to beat. I think someone would have built a deck around that by now.
Whip is pretty good, but it is not that good. I imagine Whip of Erebos Avalanche Rider probably would have showed up somewhere by now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of nice.
That's kind of nice. Just get it back.
Kill your land.
Get it back.
Echo? Any interest in Echo?
No, I will not pay Echo.
Oh, decline Echo. Okay.
Because I'm gonna get this back and kill your land. And kill your land.
And you get to gain 2 life too.
Oh yeah.
I think you broke it.
It does it all. Yeah, I would have wanted to save the Sin Collector in the graveyard for the turn that you want to like set up something big. Because you have a Sin Collector, you get to take the one counter spell maybe Keith has found in the meantime. And as you mentioned, finishing off the Jace last turn would have been really nice.
I don't know how aggressive you want to get for Keith here. Looks like pretty aggressive. Attacking for 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Granado going to go down to 15.
This is the best way to take some of the sting out of Obsidian, is just killing Josh in a couple turns.
There's a Mutavault. There's an Elspeth going up. You mentioned Golgari Charm being the big one here. Take a draw with the connections. This is going to come in, so Granado's going to go up to 16. Selden down to 10. Just a couple more lands, though, for Josh. There's a Temple Guardian to play tapped.
Elspeth is a very powerful Magic card.
You're not wrong. So whip activation, gonna get Lifebane Zombie back. Look at the verdict he knows about. Yeah, you can see how the Lifebane coming into play, it's kind of off kilter right now. It can't kill Jace. And some Mutavault's going to get active there, but Intimidate's not going to allow that to block. So it can't kill Jace. And the other thing is, if he had played a Johnny this turn, he can't pump Lifebane Zombie enough to kill Elspeth.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit of mismanagement there of resources by Josh. See, Elspeth's going to go down to 4.
I think Josh needs to activate his connections now and search for a hero's downfall.
Yeah. You know, this is a situation here where you just need to know what you're trying to accomplish. I think that's the most important thing if you're Josh, because you're in a situation that seems to be pretty scary with an Elspeth kind of taking up and making tokens. The opponent has copies of Mutavaults and a Jace out there that's been taking up the entire game, but you're still capable of winning this game. You need to know what cards you're trying to draw to and the order to find these cards.
In the short term, I like keeping Keith off of the Elspeth emblem because that's the biggest short-term concern. But
a couple of cards there: Celestial Flare, Deicide, and a Hallowed Fountain. Granado will have to split these up. I just think that if you're Josh right now, because you're working with such good information, you're in no situation to sandbag this Underworld connections. I think you should be drawing to start his turn every turn, working with information.
He's unlikely to die unless Elspeth goes unchecked for several more turns. This board right now is not probably going to be enough to win the race.
I think this is just a situation where you have to take advantage of the fact that you actually have the card advantage engines in play. Sure, your opponent has Planeswalkers, but if Selden works his way towards a Revelation, for example, I don't want any part of that game.
Right.
I got to get a move on, get these Planeswalkers off the table in some fashion, capitalize on my advantage with Obsidian, and force Selden to actually draw a Revelation on a certain turn for him to continue to actually play Magic.
And now there's a lot of draws in Josh's deck that aren't even very good anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of his deck has been cut off.
And Josh's going to draw a card here with connections. Obsidian's going to come back here. Granado's going to gain 2, and Selden's going to lose 2. But one thing you also mentioned is just the ability to outpace Obsidian here with life gain and just racing.
Josh has finally found his copy of Hero's Downfall, but is it just too little too late at this point?
It feels that way. There is Hero's Downfall. Truth be told, Selden may not even care.
At this point, he's found a Revelation. I mean, he can just let this Elspeth go and rev for, a boatload here, 5. Still have his 9 tokens in play.
Yeah.
And then at that point, the only thing he likely has to counter is Golgari Charm.
9 tokens and 3 Mutavaults.
Yep. He has a Celestial Flare to prevent Obsidian plus Lifelink from being a thing.
Mm-hmm. And there's a Johnny. See if this is going to tick up. Well, of course it's going to tick up, just which version. There we go. See another whip there. There's a Scavenging Ooze. And there is the Mentor of Heroes, a card that we don't see a ton of, but we are seeing right now.
And at this point, Josh is facing lethal on board, right? I mean, there's 13 points of power that Keith has access to, 9 tokens plus Mutavaults.
Yeah, especially if you flare that. Assuming it's Obsidian attacks and you flare it, you've got 9 tokens on board, and I think there are 3 Mutavaults, as you said, down there in the row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, can't attack, can't block, has no other defenses.
Yeah, if Selden sees the line of play here, I don't think we get another turn in this game. Now playing a Johnny here to very little effect. You see a Johnny Whip and Obsidian in play. Cards that if you were Josh, you're normally pretty happy with. There goes Obsidian. Here's a gigantic revelation.
And now Josh is totally shields down. He had 13 life.
And Selden, you know, drawing a bunch of cards.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Josh might be counting it out right now.
And maybe counting how many cards and making sure the life totals, all that good stuff. But yeah, with 9 tokens on the board and 3 Mutavaults in the row, I'm assuming Granado's life total is at 13. Yeah, he has the ability for a lethal attack.
He doesn't even have the mana up to represent something like Golgari Charm.
Yeah.
I mean, this is clear sailings.
Selden's going to untap. We'll see if he sees the lethal attacker on the board.
And
hope for his sake he doesn't miss it.
Kudos to Keith for being aggressive in a couple spots where you would not necessarily associate with blue-white with that style of play.
And Jason's going to tick up. Selden going to play a land.
Attention Magic players.
He's going reaching at those Mutavaults. Yep, there's 3 of those. That's 3 activations. This is an attack with everybody. And that is going to do it. Keith Selden's going to win this match over Josh Granado. 2-1. Blue-White Control is going to defeat Junk mid-range and move on to the finals to play against Mono Red.
Not a